Now, in this video, we'll actually set up Elasticsearch and Kibana on a MacBook Air laptop. Now, the process might be different, just a little bit different for Windows and Mac, but after one point, the process is the same for both. So let's start. Now, the best way to learn about Elasticsearch or to set up Elasticsearch is to go through the Elasticsearch documentation. You can also learn about it through the documentation as well, and you don't need to go through some external tutorials for this. So, even in this video, we'll actually go through the documentation and learn from it and actually set it up from scratch. So first, let's download Elasticsearch, and for that I'll put the link to this website in the description. And what we need to do is we need to run Elasticsearch locally on either Linux, macOS or Windows. So I'm currently using a MacBook Air, so I'll download the MacBook Air zip file, and once this is downloaded you have to extract it. So you don't have to use these uh, commands, but you can directly just double click on it and then extract the folder. And now let's go and check the folder in our downloads directory. So here we have Elasticsearch after extracting it, Elasticsearch 7.5.1, the newest version. And after this, we need to download something called as Kibana. So Kibana is a data visualization tool which you can use to visualize the data which you have in Elasticsearch. So once we set up Elasticsearch, we only need that to actually put in the data. But if we have Kibana, it will be easy to visualize the kind of data which we are putting into Elasticsearch, and also to visualize the data properly. So let's download Kibana now. Again, to download Kibana, I'll put the link in the description so that you can check it out for yourself. And I'll be downloading the Mac version. This is also a zip file which you extract to a folder, and then you can run Kibana through a folder. So I'll not show the downloading process here, but you can do that for yourself. So again, we go through downloads to find Kibana, and we have it here with the folder. Now, one thing before we jump on to actually setting up Elasticsearch, to have Elasticsearch and Kibana running on your desktop, you need to have the most updated Java JDK version in your laptop or your PC. So make sure that if you do not have Java JDK in your computer, please install that first. I will not be showing that process here. So make sure that you install Java JDK first, the newest version, or update your Java JDK so that you can actually run Elasticsearch and Kibana on your computer. Because if you don't have the updated version or the JDK, then you will you will come up with some errors in future which you will not be able to actually debug, because it will be really hidden that the JDK is not required. And I had gone through this problem when I was actually setting up Elasticsearch for my own laptop, and I had to update my JDK. So just make sure that your Java JDK has been updated or installed to the newest version. Okay, now let's go and start setting up Elasticsearch. So now we need to actually open up terminal. You can just open up terminal from here. I use a different terminal app called as iTerm for Mac, so you can do that. If you are on Windows, you can open command prompt, and what you need to do first is go to the place where you have the Elasticsearch and Kibana folders ready. So as you can see, I had it in downloads here. So I'll be going through my downloads folder, and let's go into Elasticsearch first. And now we need to go inside bin. So you can see bin here, the binary folder. We need to go inside bin, and then we need to run Elasticsearch. So here, as you can see, you see a lot of Elasticsearch modules, but we need to only run the one which only says Elasticsearch. So to run it, what you can do is just type ./Elasticsearch, and that is enough to actually run Elasticsearch on your laptop. Now this might take some time, depending upon the RAM you have in your laptop, it might change, but should be done. It should not take more than a minute or more than 2 minutes. Let's see how much time it takes for me. So first, you see a lot of things here, so just ignore them for now, unless you run into some error and this process actually closes. So it's currently loading some plugins, but there were no plugins found. And then it was trying to actually set up a local server. So you will see where we can actually see our Elasticsearch server running. And then you have the cluster. So we talked about cluster in the previous video. The link is in the description. And the health is now from red to yellow, and it does not show yellow to green. So we'll see that now. Now to actually see that you have your server running of Elasticsearch, go to the localhost 9200 port. So 127.0.0.1:9200. So on your local host, the 9200 port is for Elasticsearch, and let's click enter. And as you can see, we get some JSON data here. You can see the raw JSON data here. But since I'm using Firefox, you get a pretty version of it, and the tagline is for search. But this is not enough actually to see if your Elasticsearch is running properly or not, or if the health is actually green or not. So we'll actually see a different way of doing this, but let's just say that this is running properly for now. Let's actually set up Kibana. So open up a new terminal, or just open up a new tab in your terminal, and let's go to downloads again, where we have Kibana installed, the folder. Let me just find it. Yes, we have it here. And let's go into the Kibana folder, and again the same process for Kibana as it was for Elasticsearch. Go inside the binary folder bin, and again dot slash, just type Kibana, and that should be more than enough. Now I think Kibana takes up more time to run than Elasticsearch, at least on my computer. So let's wait for it. I don't want to pause and then sorry, play the video again, because I want to see if some errors come up or not. Until then, we can just check if Elasticsearch is running properly or not. So 9200 port is fine, still running. It has the tagline, it has all the builds, the name of my computer, cluster name, cluster ID, and let's see. Okay, so there were no errors. There's a lot of information here, don't worry about that. Just make sure that the status for Kibana changes from yellow to green, because Kibana has to be green when it runs. Only then it will be running properly. If the status is only yellow, then you might come up with some errors. And the server here is running at localhost port 5601. So Elasticsearch was running on 9200 and Kibana is on 5601. Let's go and actually run it and see what we get. So Kibana already gives you a lot of a proper website, a proper portal where you can actually do a lot of stuff with your data. You can add sample data, update data, use Elasticsearch data. So when you simultaneously run the Elasticsearch server and the Kibana server automatically tracks the data which you upload or manipulate on Elasticsearch. So you don't have to have a way to connect your Elasticsearch server with Kibana. It automatically takes care of that. Now let's see what we have to do next on the Elasticsearch documentation. So we have downloaded it, we have extracted the folders, we have also started Elasticsearch from bin. So the same thing which I did in documentation, and it's the same in Windows as well. So the process is same from now on. Now we don't have to start two more instances because it's just a video to show how to set up Elasticsearch. So we will not be starting two more instances or two more servers. And what we need to do is we need to do this step to verify that the clusters is running. So for that we need to copy this curl command. So it's a get API of Elasticsearch, where you can get some information from the Elasticsearch server. So now a very tiresome or cumbersome way to do this is to actually copy this as curl and then run it on your terminal. But there is a better way of actually running these commands, because you'll be doing this all the time with Elasticsearch. You'll be actually using a lot of APIs to upload your data or to remove it, delete it, change it. So there's a better way of actually using these commands, not on the terminal but on Kibana. So copy this as curl, go to your Kibana server and click on this tool or developer tools, and you get a very nice console here which will act as your terminal here. And you can just paste the curl command and then click this, and as you can see here you get all the information here. So my status is yellow. I think that's because I have some minor problems in my server, but this should be green for you if you had followed all the steps for now. I think I had made some changes to my server, that is why it's yellow, but it should be green for you. If it's not, then you have to actually make sure that it is green, and I'll do that later. So this shows if your health of your Elasticsearch server is good or not, and this has to be green. Make sure that it's green. It's yellow for me, but for you it has to be green. And that is how you check whether your Elasticsearch server is running or not. And let's see what's next. So now we've actually finished this page of documentation, and let's actually move on to indexing some documents or adding some data to our Elasticsearch server. So since it's a NoSQL database, Elasticsearch is a NoSQL database, let's actually put up some JSON documents inside the index and see how it actually shows. So again, we have to use the put API to actually put some data into the Elasticsearch server. So here you'll use the same examples as in the documentation and see how this works. So again, we copy this as curl because that's the easier way of doing it. Go to the console and paste it, and then click enter. And as you can see, we get this JSON which has some metadata about the function or the command we just had run. So here we have made an index customer, as you can see here, and inside that we put a document of ID 1. So we gave it an ID of our own. If not, Elasticsearch will all give it an ID by itself, and it has to be pretty printed so that you can see it properly. And as you can see, the result is created, and you have two shards, one successful, nothing failed. And now let's actually get this back from the server. So now that we have put something here, let's just see if we can extract it back from the server or not. And for that, we have the get API. So the put API is used to actually put some data into Elasticsearch, and get is to get some data back. So the process is the same again. We copy it as curl, go to Kibana, paste it, and as you can see, the APIs are pretty common, pretty similar. We just change put to get, and we get customer and the doc one. So it's pretty intuitive as well, and we just make sure that it's pretty printed so that it's easy to read. And let's click this, and yeah, as you can see, we get the metadata first and then the source. So the metadata is that the index is customer, the type is a document, and the ID is 1. And then we found the document, which is 1, so found is true, and the source is that the name is John Doe. So this is how you actually put some data into Elasticsearch and visualize that or see that using Kibana. And after that, what you need to do is create an index pattern. So we will see this and how to actually upload bulk data in the next video, because I think this is enough for one video. I don't want to extend it to a very long video. So this was a very simple introduction about how to actually install Elasticsearch and Kibana on your desktop, and make sure that you comment down all the errors which you get, and I'll try to solve all those errors in the comment section as well. So before you actually comment, make sure that you have the most updated version of Java JDK, Java Development Kit. And after that, use these websites which are in the description, the links in the description, to install Elasticsearch and Kibana, and then follow the process which I just did, and you'll be able to see it perfectly. In the next video, we'll actually upload bulk data. So in real life situations, we don't actually upload single files, right? We upload bulk data to your Elasticsearch server. We had installed Elasticsearch and Kibana on a Mac, and we also talked about the procedure to actually run Elasticsearch and Kibana on Windows or a Mac. We'll talk about the REST APIs which are provided by Elasticsearch. There are 4, and also get into how searching works in Elasticsearch. So we'll see the basics of searching as well. Now, just to have a recap of what we had done in the previous video, I'll run Elasticsearch again from my terminal, and then also show how to actually add some data or index some data into our Elasticsearch index. So let's get started. First, we run Elasticsearch. So you go inside the folder and then go inside the binary folder again, and use /Elasticsearch to run it. Now I could skip this part where I wait for Elasticsearch to actually get the server running, But if there are any errors that come up, I'd like to solve those errors real time, just to make sure that you also don't get the same errors, and if you do, you know how to solve them. So let's just wait and hope that Elasticsearch server runs properly. I think it looks good. uh, the health status has changed from red to yellow, so that's good. Let's wait, and yeah, let's test it. So localhost port 9200 is where your Elasticsearch server is going to be there. So let's refresh this, and yes, uh, as you can see, Elasticsearch is up and running. Now we need to run Kibana. So we had talked about Kibana in the previous video. Kibana is a data visualization tool for Elasticsearch. So the data which you index on Elasticsearch can be visualized, and it can do a lot of other features as well on Kibana. And to run Kibana, we have a similar procedure. So get inside the folder, go inside bin, and then run Kibana. I think Kibana is a bit faster than Elasticsearch when it comes to setting up the server. I think because Elasticsearch has to load everything which we had indexed back, so it has some data in it. It also has to manage that data. But since Kibana is just an abstraction or a visualization tool for Elasticsearch, it takes a bit less time. So as you can see, it has begun, and as you can see, the status has been changed from yellow to green. So we are ready. And yeah, before we go, as you can see, the server is running at localhost port 5601. So we check that port now. Just refresh this, and yes, so Kibana is also up and running. Now we had talked about this little hack in the previous video, where instead of copying every command as a curl and running it on a command prompt or terminal, we can use something called as the developer tools in Kibana, and use that to actually run our code or add some data to Elasticsearch. It is a very good way to actually see the output in real time as it happens, and also debug your code when you actually add something to Elasticsearch. So yeah, let's get started. So in the previous video we were here, so we were trying to index some documents to Elasticsearch. So let's do that again. So we had used put. So put is an API, index API. We'll talk about APIs in a bit. We had used that to actually add something or add some data to Elasticsearch. Let's use post. So put and post can be used in a either or situation, but we'll not get into the depths of what is the difference, because we can use both to add something or index something in Elasticsearch. So let's do that. Let's copy it as curl and just paste it here. It's that easy. Now let's make it as the sixth document, and let the name be, I don't know, uh, Elasticsearch. That's the best I could think of. Wow. And yes, awesome. So we use post here, put here. Now let's use post and make it 7, and let the name be Elastic Search again. And as you can see, it was created primary term 7, sequence 6, so it starts from 0 to 6. Awesome. Now we know how to index some documents. Let's actually talk about the different kinds of REST APIs which Elasticsearch provides. So there are 4 major REST APIs which are provided by Elasticsearch. The most important is the index API, or how you actually add something to Elasticsearch. So it helps to add or update the JSON document in an index when a request is made to that respective index with specific mapping. So mapping is another property in Elasticsearch, or another concept which we'll talk about in the next video. Mapping is very important to know how to structure your data and to add some conditions or add some boundaries to your data. For example, if I only want an integer where there is an age parameter, I can use mapping to do that. So we'll talk about mapping in the next video, but for now we'll talk about the REST APIs and we'll get into the basics of searching. So we have the index API, which can be used to add some JSON document into Elasticsearch. Next is the get API. So once we have some data in Elasticsearch, we have to get that back, right? We have to see what we have inside our index. So for that, we use the get API. So this API helps to extract type JSON object by performing a GET request for a particular document. So as you can see, the Elasticsearch provides you very simple REST APIs which you can run in your browser to get some data back or to put some data into it. You can also use a software like Postman where you can uh, simulate the APIs, get and post APIs, or you can use the dev tools by Kibana to do the same thing again. All of them do the same thing, but I think the console or the dev tools console by Kibana is the best way to do it because it helps you see the output right in front of you, and there's nothing else other than your query and the output. When you use Postman, there's a lot of other things which intimidate you or confuse you, as because it did to me. And if you use your browser, it is really not the best interface for that. So use the Kibana dev tools when you want to write a query and see the result instantly. Okay. Next is the delete API. So if you want to delete a particular index or delete some mapping, delete a document, you can do that by sending the delete request to Elasticsearch. And lastly is update. So if you want to update some documents which you have previously indexed into Elasticsearch, you can do that using the update API. Now, today we'll talk about the first two APIs. We'll talk about index and get. So we just saw how index API works to add something or to update a JSON document. And let's use the get API to actually get some results back, and also use the get API to know how search works. So basically in Elasticsearch, you want to search something, so that means you want to see the results of that search, right? If I want to search for Elasticsearch or search for programming knowledge, I'll see or I'll get some results back, right? That is why we use the get API to perform searching in Elasticsearch. So let's see that in action. Let me just close this. So let's actually just replace post with get and remove this, and let's see if we can get the 7 document again. Yes, so we get the 7 document. Let's see if there's a 6. Yes. Is there a 2? Yes, there is. Awesome. So that is how we get the documents back. And now let's see how search works. So again, to learn anything about Elasticsearch, the documentation is the place to go. They have an amazing documentation and they teach everything from scratch. So as you can see, we can use the get API to search for something, and I will not use this example because we don't have a bank index right now. We have a customer index with name. So let's see something which goes good with name or to search with names. So yeah, this looks good. We have a get bank search and it matches the address for bank. So similarly, let's search for something which matches a name. So let's copy this as curl, go back here, remove this and put this on. So let me just tell you what is happening here. So we use the get API again, and inside the get API we have the underscore search API. So the search API is used by the get REST API, and instead of bank we have customer because we are using the customer index here. And this is the syntax of how you write a query. So you have two curly parentheses here and you have query inside it. So everything works as a JSON document, so a key value pair, so that it's very easy to read and very intuitive to understand what's happening here. So you can just read this in simple English. So I have a query and I want to match something, and that is the address to this particular name. So if this was a bank, this query would match everything which had mill lane in it, every address which had mill lane in it. But since we have customer here and here we have name, let's actually see if we can find something. So let's find Elasticsearch and see if that exists in our database. Okay, so it did not time out, so timeout is false. That means we found something. Successful is 1. Awesome. Hits, so hits is the number of elements which you find which have the name as Elasticsearch. So we have 2. We have the index 6 which is Elasticsearch, and 7 as Elasticsearch again. So it also searched for the substring Elasticsearch in this entire string. That is how good the query is and the search API is. So yeah, this is how you can actually search in Elasticsearch. A very simple introduction. Logstash is a tool based on the filter pipes patterns for gathering, processing, and generating the logs or events. It helps in centralizing and making real time analysis of logs and events from different sources. Logstash is written on JRuby programming language that runs on a Java virtual machine. Hence, you can run Logstash on different platforms. It collects different types of data like logs, packets, events, transactions, timestamps, etc. from almost every type of source. The data source can be social data, e-commerce data, news, financial data, IoT devices, mobile devices, etc. So Logstash is a plugin-based data collection and processing engine. It comes with a wide range of plugins that make it possible with easily configured to collect, process and forward data in many different architectures. Processing is organized into one or more pipelines. In each pipeline, one or more input plugins receive or collect data that is then placed on an internal queue. This is by default small and held in memory, but can be configured to be larger and persisted on disk in order to improve reliability and resiliency. So let's talk about some general features. Logstash can collect data from different sources and send to multiple destinations. It can also handle multiple HTTP request and respond data. Logstash can handle all types of logging data as we discussed, and some more include Apache logs, Windows event logs, data over network protocols, data from standard input, and more. So it can work on all your operating systems and can deal with any type of data which you want it to handle. Logstash also provides a variety of filters which helps the user to find more meaning in the data by parsing and transforming it. Next, Logstash can also be used for handling census data in IoT. Let's talk about some key concepts when we jump into Logstash. So the first is the event object. It is the main object in Logstash and it encapsulates the data flow in the Logstash pipeline. So Logstash uses this object to store the input data and add extra fields created during the filter stage. Logstash also offers an event API to developers to manipulate such events. Next is the pipeline. It comprises of data flow stages in Logstash from input to output. The input data is entered in the pipeline and is stored in the form of an event, then sends an output destination in the user or end system's desirable format. We saw the diagram of a pipeline in the previous slides, and that is the definition right here. So let's talk about what is inside the pipeline. So the first stage of the pipeline is the input, which is used to get the data in Logstash for further processing. Logstash offers various plugins to get data from different platforms. Some of the most commonly used platforms are file systems, Redis, Syslog, and Beats. The middle stage of Logstash pipeline is the filter, where the actual processing of events takes place. A developer can use predefined regex patterns from Logstash to create sequences for differentiating between fields in the events and criteria of accepted events. The last stage in the Logstash pipeline is output, where the output events can be formatted into the structure required by the destination systems. Lastly, it sends the output event after complete processing to the destination by using plugins. Some of the most commonly used plugins are Elasticsearch, File, Graphite, StatSD, etc. What we're concerned about in this tutorial is Elasticsearch, how we can use Logstash to actually input files into Elasticsearch. Let's talk about the advantages of Logstash. Logstash offers regex pattern sequences to identify and parse the various fields in an input event. Logstash supports a variety of web servers and data sources for extracting logging data. It also provides multiple plugins to parse and then transform the logging data into any desirable format, and in this case, it's going to be JSON. It is a centralized software which makes it easy to process and collect data from different servers. As we talked about, Logstash also uses the HTTP protocol, which enables the user to upgrade Elasticsearch versions without having to upgrade Logstash in a lockstep. There are a lot of disadvantages with Logstash, but I am mainly concerned with these two. So, working with Logstash can sometimes be a little complex as it needs a very good understanding and an analysis of the input logging data. So, as a beginner, it can be very hard or intimidating to actually get into Logstash. And we'll talk about some workarounds for this. We'll talk about a tool which I have developed, which you can use to index files into Elasticsearch, a lot of files without using Logstash. But at some point, when you are scaling up, you have to stop making your own tools and give in to Logstash. And that is when Logstash can be a bit too complex, but once you get the hang of it, it becomes very easy to use it. Next, the filter plugins are not generic, so you have to find a method so that you are able to correctly sequence the patterns and avoid errors when you're parsing files into Logstash and then output it to something else. So yeah, that was a very simple introduction of what Logstash is. Now we can go ahead and install Logstash and also stash our first event. So basically, we are going to perform a hello world of Logstash now. So the best way to learn about Logstash is the documentation. So any ELK stack, Elasticsearch, Logstash, or Kibana, can be perfectly learned and understood with the documentation itself. So during these tutorials, I'll also refer to documentation every single time and use some pieces of code from the documentation because they explain the concept very easily. So the link to all these websites will be in the description below, so you can check them out and start from right there. There'll also be a very good introduction to Logstash, a very good blog, and some other blog references which I have used to prepare for this tutorial. Okay, so just like Elasticsearch, the installation process is going to be the same as we discussed for Elasticsearch and Kibana. So the first step is to check whether your Java version is right or not. So make sure that you have Java installed, and once you run this in your command prompt or terminal, something like this should show up. So there is some extra cases for Linux systems as well. So make sure you read them before you jump into any downloading step. You can also install a binary and go ahead with that. I think that is what I did for this tutorial. I have a MacBook Air, so I downloaded the targ.gz file and directly placed that into my folder. Then there are some other ways of doing it. You can find the way which is comfortable with you. People who use macOS and you use the homebrew packet manager, they can also use these two steps, which I think are the most easiest and simplest step to download a Logstash on a macOS and start working with it. So once you do it, let me show you how it looks like. So you will have your Logstash folder in your downloads folder again, but I have dragged it to my home folder because I have Elasticsearch, Kibana, and Logstash at the same place, so I can use them together in the same directory. Then once you go inside, you have a binary file in which you have all the Logstash executables, and you can use these to start Logstash. So we'll see how that happens in a bit. So yeah, make sure that you have, it is recommended that you have your Elasticsearch server, Kibana, and Logstash folders in the same directory or at the same level, so that it's easier for you to uh, manipulate them at the same level and also use them side by side. So that is why I make sure that all my folders for the ELK stack are in the same level. So once that is done, let's see how we can start our first event. So again, I'll be using the documentation because it has a very handy documentation which you can use all the time to actually understand how Logstash works. So as we discussed previously, a Logstash pipeline has two required elements, the input and the output, and an optional element called as the filter. The input the input plugins consume data from a source, the filters modify the data, and the output writes to the destination. And here the destination is Elasticsearch. So we're going to perform an event. We're going to write something in the standard input and use that and check if that Logstash has actually logged that event or not. So to test the Logstash installation, we run the most basic Logstash pipeline. So this is the most basic one. So let's do this. Let's copy the first line of code and we cd inside the folder. So we are inside Logstash now. Let me increase the size so that it's clear. Yeah, I think this is good. Yeah. So let's do that again. We cd into Logstash. Then the next is to perform this line of code. So we go inside bin Logstash e and write this piece of configuration. So while this sets up, I think it is currently setting up, so we need to wait for that. The e flag here enables you to specify your configuration directly from the command line. So that is what the use of this is. The e flag here is that you can directly specify a command on the terminal, or else you have to always make a different file, make a different configuration file, and then extract the commands from that file. Okay, so now we can test things very easily because of this. The pipeline in the example takes input from standard input, so we'll be taking input from stdin and also moves that to standard output. So std out is the standard output here, and it happens in structured format. So once we see pipeline main started, we can then enter what we want to enter. So as you can see, it's now currently configuring. So we need to wait for this. We need to make sure that there are no errors while Logstash is building up. So once you see successfully started Logstash API endpoint, we can start running our hello world example. So let's start with hello world. So let's say hello world. And as you can see, we have a timestamp, we have a host, my name, and the message which we just logged. So now you can type as many examples as you want. So hello Ronak, hello again. And as we can see, Logstash is logging every single element. Now, in the upcoming tutorials, we'll actually log some files from Logstash or from our input data source into Elasticsearch using Logstash. And before we actually do that, we'll have one more tutorial between them where we'll talk about a tool which I made called as ES Indexer, where you can actually upload multiple JSON files directly into Elasticsearch without using Logstash. So yeah, this was a very simple brief introduction about how Logstash works, and we'll talk about this in depth in the next videos. Thank you.